It's been a long road getting past copyrights. It's been a long time, but the salon will start right now. Hello, friends. Ahoy, hoy, and welcome to the salon. It's the worst thing I've ever done to you, all of you, and to the audience. And get excited because there's going to be 8 more weeks of that intro. That's right. We are talking about Star Trek Enterprise. Tonight, we are discussing the pilot, Broken Bow. And it being Star Trek Enterprise, we thought a smaller crew of just white men would do it right. Inadvertently, though, friends are not available this evening, but it does fit the theme. Before we kick things off, all of the podcast things, want to remind folks to please do like and subscribe here on YouTube, over on Twitter or Bluesky. If you got a couple of dollars you can throw our way on Patreon, that's certainly appreciated. We have 2 new bonus episodes out this week. We've discussed the motion picture and porn, a porn parody, which you decide which is hornier. Both were really fun to do. Those are over on our Patreon. And we also, of course, have a store now at tinyurl.com/SalonTrekStore. You can also find it on our website, salontrek.com. We've got some fun merch that we've designed over there. If you need a new hoodie, a notebook, you can also support your 8th favorite Star Trek podcast, and that is certainly appreciated. Another quick note before we dive in, some breaking news, breaking Star Trek news that we wanted to highlight. Surprise! There is a done and produced Star Trek Con audio podcast coming later this year, starring a gentleman whose name I totally remember, and I meant to write it down, and Ren Schmidt from For All Mankind. So if you love Margot Madison as much as I do, then get excited because she's part of it. And
are you still looking for Naveen Andrews' name?
Thank you so much. Naveen Andrews from Lost. I didn't want to get it wrong. I almost said Navir, and I was like, no, that is a Babylon 5 character and NA. Anyway.
It's 2 Babylon 5 characters mushed together.
Yeah, two ambassadorial aides. But super exciting. The franchise, as it turns out, not dead. Some YouTubers, it seems wrong. Whoops. So that was exciting. We also got some breaking news today. A new Star Trek toy line was announced a few weeks ago with Master Replicas, but today they announced their new die-cast ships. So similar offering, but different with the who is now Eagle Moss fan home ships. So really exciting. The franchise is doing well. New licenses are also always exciting. And then also, before we really dive in, I did want to highlight one other piece of breaking news from yesterday. A little bit of disappointing news that I want to make sure that our viewers are aware of, and that is Paramount capitulating to the Trump administration around DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. It's a slightly more complicated situation with Paramount than like a Target. Target just up and did it. Paramount has a merger underway with Skydance. We've all known about that. The future of Star Trek is hopefully in good, interesting hands, supporters of Trek moving forward. But Donald Trump's handpicked FEC chair has said, specifically looking into mergers, that they will be looking at DEI programs as a reason to potentially block them. And so Paramount is capitulating because DEI has become a dog whistle for racist assholes. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Anybody who doesn't look like me, who has a job, is called a DEI hire. It's racist. It's wrong. and it really sucks that the home of Star Trek has capitulated. So, something I am recommending for folks, if you are frustrated about this, as I am, you could head on over to paramount.com/contact us, throw in some information, and write them a message telling them that you support diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that you would like them to not capitulate to the Donald Trump administration. All that said, if you are planning to end your Paramount Plus subscription, that's not something I'm suggesting, but some people have said that they're going to. Be sure to write in that message, this is why I'm doing it. And spell it out: diversity, equity, and inclusion. Make them talk about what they don't like. What about diversity? What about equity? What about inclusion that you don't like? All right. That said, let's get into the Salon. We're here to talk about Star Trek Enterprise, Broken Bow, the pilot. Now, before we really get into this pilot, we simply must set an intention.
Indeed, we must. To set an intention tonight, I thought it would be fun if we went around the room and, in honor of Broken Bow and the Klingons crashing in a cornfield, because that apparently is what launched Starfleet into the stars. Anyway, in honor of that, I thought it would be fun if we went around the room and talked about what would happen if it wasn't Klingons, and if it wasn't, who do you want it to be? So who would have been more interesting to have crash in a cornfield? Oh, thanks, Joanne. This old thing. My answer to this question, because I always like to start us off, is I'm gonna actually potentially steal Matt's thunder, and I hope I'm not. I hope this wasn't going to be your answer, but I'm going to say Lieutenant Commander Yor, the time soldier that ends up being featured in an episode of Star Trek Discovery. I don't know, tying in time and the temporal Cold Wars, and I just thought it would have been fun and interesting and could have propelled things in a very different direction. Obviously, they had no idea that was going to end up being something that happens in the future in Star Trek Discovery, but I just thought it would be cool. So that's my answer, and I hope it's not Matt's answer, but we'll find out right now. Matt.
That was actually not going to be my answer. I
Good.
didn't even. I was thinking a species, so I wasn't thinking
Love it.
like individual. I am kind of in between. Like my original answer was going to be Romulan, because I feel like, Romulan sets up the Romulan Federation War pretty well later on. But also, the more I was thinking about it, I think it would be really interesting to see the Cardassians, because then it would be like, here's this advancing race that they could easily come in and occupy, really, and pull a Bajoran occupation on Earth. And I think that would have been a really interesting thing to have seen, like how much the Vulcans knew about them and like how advanced they were at that point. So yeah, I think we went with Cardassians.
Also, instead of a cornfield, it turns out the Cardassians just crashed into Washington, D.C. in 2025.
Exactly.
Anywho, Will.
Yeah. I admittedly struggled with this one because I think the Klingons are the perfect choice for this.
Okay, fair enough.
But I think I also went the temporal Cold War route because I thought that was one of the more interesting aspects of the series, and I would have picked Spock. So I would have picked Spock as like a time traveler, like he's involved in the Cold War in some regard, in some way, and and like ends up there to push the story forward, because I figured if there was anyone that would probably have been sucked into that, and then we learned later that the Vulcan science can't, they've deemed that time travel is impossible, blah blah blah. But to have Spock, someone from the future, come in and like fuck up this timeline, I think would be interesting. But then I realized that's just the plot of Star Trek 2009. So yeah. Anyway, that's all I could come up with. I couldn't think of another race or anyone. I was like, who would it be? But like, I don't know. I thought like the Klingons and the Klingon being a classic alien, and the Suliban being this kind of new one that's being tampered with was probably the best choice. But to really fuck with people, I probably would have done Spock or like, I don't know, Chekhov. Who knows? Someone from the original series. I don't know.
Walter Koenig falls out of
know.
space. I love
That
it.
one engineer that died. I don't know. You know,
The one.
yeah, or Seven of Nine, someone like that. Like it would have been interesting if it was like someone from a prior series that popped off. But yeah, D and me.
I love all of these choices. I agree that I think the Klingons are the right choice for what they were going for. That said, like I've said many times, I love when Star Trek does something different. I love the Suliban as a concept. The execution a little bit later gets a bit wonky. So my change here would be it being Saren, the Suliban we meet later in the episode. Let's meet her right away. And she takes them on a mission to, maybe it's to Rigel, to get the data that she gives to Clang, was his name. Yes, that's me. Oh my God, Ken with the jokes. Get it? Suliban, flat, through the door. Love it.
Does that count? That's not a well, actually, is it?
All
No.
right.
But I did give a tosser alert for Spock. So
Yeah.
My bad.
Oh,
I
goodness.
invoked the toss.
Well, speaking of
I'm leaving
toss,
that alone.
God. Here we go. The intentions are set. Let's dive into our top thoughts on this pilot. I will kick off the top thoughts segment as usual. I have rewatched this pilot twice this past week. This is one of my favorite. It doesn't surpass Emissary to me, but I do really enjoy this pilot. I think it is one of the most solid pilots of Star Trek. It does what a pilot is supposed to do. That said, having rewatched it twice this week, we've said this about all of the pilots, and it's still certainly true. This is very of its time. There was a very weird early 2010s like resurgence of sexism in a weird way, and like the annoying mom in every TV show, and they definitely tried to do that with T'Pol here. And that really bothers me because I find myself watching this and I'm like, no, she's right. No, listen to her. Yet, no, actually, she's right. Stop being like they're pretty fucking rude to her for no reason. And Archer has always rubbed me the wrong way, not the way that he could and should.
Problematic gay alert.
The men of this show are hot, and I'm very down for the objectification that we get of men in this series that we didn't in others. However, that said, the arrogance of the white men of this show again feels very of its time. It was very post 9/11. Like I get what they're trying to do. We're green. We're not all that. We're not really in space yet. But like Archer's hatred of the Vulcans does not make a lot of sense to me. Like they don't fully explain what it is, like why they withheld technology, but they like, how is that holding us back? Like your dad wasn't good enough. Sorry, he didn't, like they didn't say that he built it and the Vulcans said, no, and they took it away. It's just that they didn't just give us the technology. So how is that holding your daddy back? Like rewatching it from 2025 is weird place. The flashbacks were unnecessary to a little bit racist kid Archer. And all that said, it was a really fun pilot. I love the new characters, and I especially love T'Pol. I think they do Hoshi dirty. We'll talk about it. I'm rambling enough. I will say some good things about this pilot. So those are my top thoughts. Will, what are your top thoughts on Broken Bow?
I this rewatch I ended up liking a lot less than I used to. I loved this pilot. I would have said that up until probably this rewatch, I would say it was probably my favorite because I think I always thought it established the series in a fun way, and like as a prequel, it it feels like a prequel to me. Like not just like visually, like it's hard to, it's a prequel to a show from the 60s, so it's hard to they were immediately going to get a lot of flack for, everything looks too new, it looks too nice for whatever. Yeah, it was cardboard sets. Like I can't and it's a different thing entirely. But I will say watching this, I can really feel the franchise fatigue that they're really, even though the series is new, they've really given themselves a clean slate. You can feel the fatigue of everyone involved. Like it feels so tired, and you can see that they're relying on a lot of techno babble. Like there's things in it that are really interesting, like the characters. Like I like T'Pol in this is obviously she's incredible. Jolene Blalock is an amazing actress. I think she brings a lot of life to the Vulcans in a way that's really interesting. And the dynamics of the Vulcans and the humans is really cool because it's like what I think there's stuff that's really unsaid about it. Like we're not told or shown like really what the Vulcans are doing. It's kind of a strange thing. And then it is there is like a deliberate attempt for it to be like felt seen as sexy, but like it feels a little gross, like randomly zooming in onto Paul while she's rubbing gel on her boobs underneath a shirt is it's a little like, oh, that feels gross because I think we should have had Trip rub some on his junk. Like I think there should have been like kind of this back and forth. Um, but anyway, it does feel a product of its time. It felt tired. It was kind of a bummer because you could tell that it feels like they're retreading a lot of things. But I think as this episode, it's really solid. I think it gets a little. I think the space timey fight towards the end is a little lame, but because the visual effects are weird. Where he's like, "Oh, I'm dodging a phaser," and it's in slow mo. Anyway, we'll talk about it. But it's weird. It's weird. It looks weird, but it's fun. But it does. The entire time I did catch myself going, to Paul's right. Why are you like the fuck's wrong with you? Like, anyway, it's fine. Matt.
I mean, everyone knows I am not the biggest fan of Enterprise, mainly for all of these reasons, because to me, the entire series feels like that early 2000s, 2010s, Stan, like you were saying, like boys club feeling of my dad made the warp engine and now I have a bunch of my friends that we're all super hot and successful and we're on it and now we're on the flagship. Like it always had that like feel, like he always gave me that ick of like, I'm the first captain, I'm gonna go down and I don't care what you say because I'm a human. It was very like when he goes down getting ahead, but like Archer is always doing shit like that. Like, I'm a human. I don't have to care about other space people because they're not white in my eyes. Like, that's kind of what it was like. I don't care about other cultures. That's dumb. And it's like, it's interesting because it does start the series of Star Trek as a, like, look how far we've come. But at the same time, it's like, I don't want to watch how far we had to come. And I think that's what it's like. It now going back and rewatching it, I can watch it as almost like a necessity. Like it was that it needed to happen to get us to where we are now. And especially now, um, in 2025, where we're seeing like, okay, yeah, yeah, we got a ways to go still. It's a gentle reminder, but it's also not letting me escape into the fun of Star Trek. And admittedly, yeah, this was the era of CGI that was still getting off the ground, but the visuals are rough in a lot of this. Like, and not in like the campy 80s rough that like TNG, like, oh, it just wasn't technology. This is like, oh, like you can tell the technology was there, they just didn't know how to use it yet, and that's what I think feels like even more cringy. So I don't know. I watched it.
I love that the summary is I watched it. I vividly remember watching this when it premiered and reading about, fans pushing back on the whole prequel concept, and everybody always gets worked up when prequels happen. I don't quite understand why. It just seems like it's a thing that people like to complain about. I will say that as far as prequels go, I feel like Disco actually tackles the concept a little better in that they stick with one character and one character's story. That season 1 really takes place over the course of a matter of weeks. Granted, there's a time travel jump into several months ahead, but like for the most part, we're not watching an entire year of Discovery's mission. We're just watching a mission that takes place in season 1. And that just feels like a smarter thing to do when you're going back in time and dabbling into an established universe. So I found that to be the only kind of rub for me when I first watched it. I do remember having all of the same feelings that all of you mentioned with respect to why is no one listening to T'Pol? Why is she there if we're just going to ignore her? Archer threatening to punch her in the first time he met her was super weird and cringy. Also, I don't know if this was a Bakula choice. I don't know if this was directing. I don't know if it was just writing and he had no other options. But Archer's all over the fucking place. Like he's a daddy, daddy's boy tech bro, nepo baby who takes over this starship, who wants to go on an adventure but wants to punch women in the face when they say something sassy to him. But he also brings his beagle with him on the mission. Like none of these things make any sense. He's cavalier, but he's not. He's wholesome. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, in fairness, it does feel very straight white guy. Like, it does check a lot of those insecurity boxes all the way down.
I guess it's just the all over the placeness of the character left me at a place where fast forward 4 years from now, I can't tell you who Jonathan Archer is. And I don't think that's not a Bakula problem. It's a writing fatigue. It's a what thought did we put into creating this character, because we know that the character was actually just a quick corporate backlash to we just had a woman in charge and we just had a black man in charge. So quick, like do something to make the fans calm, as though somehow the fans don't appreciate the diversity, which hello, 2025 Paramount making weird choices. Anyway, the story itself I thought was great. I thought the all of the marketing for this worked at the time. The inclusion of, I don't remember the name of that song. It's not a great song, but at the time.
How dare you? It's Wherever You Will Go by The Calling.
Yes, that from them. It was appropriate at the time though, because it was on every terrestrial radio station that played music. So that was clever. The casting is just fucking weird. I don't understand it's funny saying this on a night where only white men are on your screen, but like the choice to choose white actors for roles that were not by character definition needed to be white actor. Like Jonathan Archer did not have to be Caucasian. Trip Tucker, I guess maybe. And that's about it. Like everyone else could have been an actor of a different background. So it doesn't make sense. So it just feels icky. It felt icky then and it feels icky now.
And even only if not having the main cast, like the supporting cast is very white heavy too. Like all of Starfleet Command that we see, the Vulcan
cast, the admirals, the all of the Vulcans, including T'Pol. I mean, I love Jolene, and I'm glad that we got her in the Trek universe. But like that character did not need to be cast with a Caucasian actor. It's just weird and feels funny in Star Trek, and just doesn't feel right. I don't know how else to describe it other than saying watching it is a really weird regression. The sexism I struggle with. I do appreciate the shared objectification by including men in it finally. That said, okay, so first I'll say for horny reasons, never actually objectifying Travis bothers me. Go ahead and hit the button. I'll take it.
Problematic gay alert.
because if anyone caught my eye in that crew, it was him. But for practical reasons, the desexualization of the only man of color in the cast is a problem. So overall, great story, very much of its time, but also even before its time. So there are a lot of things that just feel wrong. And Jolene's costume is illogical. And I'll just leave it at that.
It could have been hornier, I think, is what we're saying. And that's our episode. Good night. Now, those are our top thoughts, but we're going to deep dive these characters. I want to say good things. I do, but I agree with a lot of the criticism we've been sharing thus far. And I want to start with the captain. Again, this is an in-universe criticism. Scott Bakula is great, but my goodness, yeah, I think Trevor, you were right. Archer is all over the place. He's very angry, and maybe I'm of my time right now with like white Trump supporters are so angry, even having won. Like they're still so angry, even though they won, and it like I don't want to put Trumpism onto Archer per se, but he was so pissy and whiny in this episode. I was surprised rewatching it. Like, why is he being so aggressive? Like, being passionate about getting out into space and not being held back anymore. I can see that, but it was there was a lot of anger and a lot of arrogance. Particular, like all three of the main white male cast or characters, excuse me, not the cast, the characters were very arrogant in this episode. Like Trip not listening to Paul at all, but like when they're on that planet and he wants to be a white knight with the alien child weaning, and she has to be like, no, she's weaning her child, shut up, Trip. And it's the same thing with Archer. Like every step of the way he's being a dick to her. Like even at the end when he says that he wants her to stay, he makes her ask because it would look weak for him to ask for his science officer to stay. Like you look weak making your first officer do something you should do. It was a weird choice to make. Thoughts on Jonathan Archer? Any others? Will?
Yeah, I did this time around. I did notice that he's kind of all over the place. He's playing too many things kind of at once. Like he has to be the optimistic captain. We the kind of pre-Kirk as it were. But then he also is like weirdly racist and then also really aggressive. And then there's this strange underlying frustration with his character, which would make a lot of sense if we saw this. Like you kind of get a sense that like they've been trying to launch the Enterprise for a long time and the Vulcans are going like, we don't think you're ready to do that, even though it's like you have your own fucking Starfleet, just launch your ship. Like why are you listening to these Vulcans? Like if you want to launch it, you know, like it just felt like they were being blackmailed and they were just like, I want to go play with my toys, and their mom's like, no, you can't play with that yet, you can't open your present, it's not Christmas. And it's just like it's a little frustrating. And like if we saw like, oh, they fucked up and something happened, I don't know, like there needed to be more context to his like general frustration other than my dad died before he could see his engine go. Which is like fucking stupid. It's so dumb. It's not a good enough reason for you to try to say that you're gonna punch a woman in the face before she's even said 2 words to you. Like yeah, she was kind of coming off like a bitch, but like she's Vulcan, so it's like she don't feel that. But like it's very odd. There's a very, and strangely I don't remember getting any better. It gets worse once we get to season 3, and then they try and fix it in season 4 and it just doesn't work. Like now I'm like the recontextualization of this character, I'm like, God, you're kind of a terrible captain. It's like, did he want to be in Starfleet at all? Did he do it because of his dad? Like it seems like a guy who hates his job but is like, I want to do it because I want to like I'm sick of sitting here and waiting. It's like, I don't know. It's weird. I don't know what his character is doing.
That's exactly like that's the exact thing that I've always had the biggest issue with. It's like this complex of him being this just assumed best person in the room because daddy did the thing and I am the loudest and most macho guy that everybody else wants to be because I'm the captain, and that's my qualification.
Mm.
And I will say, like, as far as like the hatred towards the Vulcan thing, I honestly don't even mind that as much, only because going back and recontextualizing it, to me, it was like, oh, they mentioned several times how the Vulcans had been holding them back for the last century. So, like, Archer and everybody, like most of those that era, hadn't even been around long enough to know the origins of it. They've just grown up, and you're kind of seeing this like generational hatred towards the Vulcans. It was like, yeah, your grandparents, Zephyr Cochrane's era, hated them because they held them back at first, and then they passed that on to their kids, who passed it on to their kids, and now we're seeing Archer hate them, and then we're seeing things start to come around, like, oh, okay, you're not actually that bad, and as you know, it goes on, we kind of get the resolution in that. But as far as Archer himself, I still find him to be like hands down not just like, oh, I don't like that Starfleet captain. He is the worst Starfleet captain. Like, he is a terrible Starfleet captain by any measure of any standards. So I've never been a huge fan.
Even Pike is better, which is
a lot. Yes. Well, depends on which Pike. The one that said he can't get used to women on the bridge, or
it's the same character.
Is there a difference? I think I just want to rewrite this show. I think instead of Voyager being the Lost in Space version of Star Trek, I think Enterprise should have been. And then Archer was just the ceremonial captain, but gets stuck as the captain because he was never really equipped to be that person in the first place, but has to slowly rise to the occasion. That is the only way to make this character make sense, because he doesn't belong in the chair.
Yeah.
So Daddy invented warp drive. We're going to go on a warp 5 flight. Whoopsie, we fell into an anomaly. We're going to discover our way home. T'Pol is stuck there. Lots of people are stuck there. Like, but to make these choices for Starfleet to be like, that's our guy. We're going to send you with her, even though you hate these people. Which, by the way, you shouldn't be allowed to be a captain in Starfleet, Earth Starfleet, or Federation Starfleet if you have a passionate bigotry toward any species of people. And last but not least, right into the existing script, if we're not going to change it and make it Lost in Space, change the just add a couple lines of how did they hold us back. Just running around saying the Vulcans held us back doesn't make it make sense.
Yeah.
How they were, and don't say star chart. Like, my God, we have satellites now. Like, we have orbiting telescopes. We can measure where stars are. Like, stop it. It's weird. Just tell us how they're holding us back. Explain that Zephyr Cochrane's ship worked once and then exploded, and they've slowly been working with us on the technology. I don't know. Anything to make it make sense. But it doesn't make sense on its own. It's just a line of dialogue that they repeat over and over. It's like a Republican talking point. It makes no sense. Repeating it over and over doesn't make it true.
Yeah. It felt like all that they did was not give us better technology, and that's not holding us back.
Right. Which is their prerogative, is like them being like, why would we share our technology with you? And if it's like, the idea is that they nurture post warp drive, like they nurture other, they make first contact and they nurture them into like the galactic, onto the galactic stage in some regard. That makes a lot of sense. But like, that again is just kind of weird. It's like there need to be more context as to why they're not doing this. There was a lot of stuff in the comments about how they didn't like the way the Vulcans were in this, but I actually kind of loved it because it makes it seem like all of the aliens have a place to go. Like, we weren't the only ones that needed to like figure our shit out and be like better, people in the universe. But even the Vulcans had their fucking shady shit, and like the Andorians do, and all these people have all of their problems. So like, that's like, I will play devil's advocate, and I do love that part, but like, it is weird that that's like why they're doing it, because then if you find out, they're doing it because they, they're trying to keep us on their side or something, or like trying to do, then that's like fucking shady and awful. And it's like there's needs the part of this episode that like we're kind of all over the place. But like the part of this episode, the struggle should not have been the Enterprise crew trying to get Klang back and back to Kronos. It should have been the struggle of the crew trying to launch the Enterprise and struggling to dealing with the Vulcans. Like repairing that relationship. Like that should have been the central conflict of this, not the Suliban. It's interesting. Like that stuff's really, I do find it interesting. But like if that's the impetus, and then they're like, we don't think you're ready to go out there because this farmer shot him, and like they're trying to launch this ship, and they're like, okay, and maybe the ship's not working. Like the struggle is that the Vulcans are going, we can't, you're making a decision to do this, and you won't be able to get to Kronos with your ships you have now. Like
we should note that they've said, it was noted by Brandon Braga that two things. Two things that I think are at play here, and things that we've been talking about. One, they did say that they wanted to take a year off, and the studio was like, nope, you need to get into production right away. And they also wanted their first season to be mostly on Earth, launching the ship. And so I wonder if some of this storytelling could have happened there. And the studio was like, no, it's a Star Trek show. We're not going to call it that at first, but it's a Star Trek show. You got to be out there Star Trekking.
Right. And it's not an interesting pilot if it's not interesting, and I get why they're doing that, but the context of some of these relationships don't ever really get like fleshed out. They kind of just get brushed under the rug a little bit. Like I don't know. It's very. There could be more to happen to it, but I think the show in the time. They shows with that kind of nuance and kind of highbrow thinking and like what we would consider now like prestige television just didn't exist at the time. Yeah. So you couldn't really have that. We couldn't have that kind of really nuanced, sticky discussion about why the Vulcans are doing this, what the context of this is, why Archer harbors all of this resentment to them, all this stuff. You couldn't have it at the time. Yeah. So they kind of go, look, their ship has round nacelles. Woo! Like it's like, okay, cool. Like it has missiles. It's just like, I'm like, okay, like you can just move on. But I don't know. It would be cool to revisit this, but
totally different than Shields.
Right.
I also I would like to point out that like Trev had a great idea if you also retool it to just be Star Trek Gilligan's Island. Just they go out for a 3-hour tour and then they get stranded and have to somehow put it all back together.
But that was Voyager. So it's like, like this is such a rehash of a rehash. It's so, And
then Flock saves everyone with things made out of coconut.
And that's exactly what
every
I was
episode.
Yeah. Yep. Somehow he inflates his own head a couple times to.
Speaking of coconuts, what character's next, Dan?
Unintentional. Speaking of coconuts, it's T'Pol.
Oh, I was hoping it'd be Trip Tucker and that chest.
I mean,
here's the thing.
We'll get there.
I didn't get the visuals in advance, so I didn't know which was next. It just didn't matter. I'm actually,
I don't know. I am actually going in reverse order. I had intended to start in a different direction, but then we were talking about Archer. So
who were you planning to start with?
Travis.
Me too.
Yeah. Oh, and it's gonna take a second to
problematic gay alert.
But let's talk about this icon. Jolene Blalock was incredible. One of the better actors on the show, and that's not a knock on the other actors. She just gives an incredible performance. I think she is probably my favorite Vulcan. I agree with Will. I like what Enterprise did with the Vulcans because Tuvok was an asshole. Spock was an asshole. Now we're learning, they're just all assholes. And like it's a little problematic that Star Trek makes their alien races all one thing. But T'Pol is my favorite Vulcan because she's kind of an asshole too, but in a much more nuanced way. Like them putting her in the sex pot box, I think is problematic and shitty, but she plays it so well. She's like, all right, but I'm going to be a badass scientist. I'm going to go toe to toe with the white male lead. I think she's incredible. I love that character. I think she got a lot of good stuff. I don't think she got enough, which is certainly a problem with some of the other folks. And you know, we're mainly talking about the pilot, but I will say again, as another knock on Archer, something that really pisses me off throughout the series, when she is in command, they make it out like she's the problem. In times like Archer, according to Daniels, is like the most important man in the universe, which makes no fucking sense. To Paul being the one making certain decisions is why Earth was destroyed. It's really fucked up. Spoiler alert for 3 seasons from now. We'll get there in a few weeks. But what we saw in the pilot, her in command, very good, very capable, very demure. Who has thoughts on T'Pol? Will, then Trevor, then Matt. I saw the hands in that order.
Really quick, just before T'Pol, before you move on from that, like the whole Daniel saying he's the most important person in the universe, I find really, really entertaining when they do the Star Trek DTI books, because two of the agents clearly, like the main 2 agents in the book, call Daniels out. They meet him like twice, and they're like, you literally only care about strong, impressionable, like male characters in Starfleet history. So they call him out like, you handheld Archer to do that. Like,
Yeah.
he didn't need to be. You chose him and you just worshipped him for no reason. Like, so it's really entertaining that they like call him out that he wasn't the most important. Daniels just decided he wanted him to be and just ushered that whole thing through. And it could have been somebody else. Anyway, that was all before we moved on.
Paul. Yes. The wig fluctuates from being good to being bad to being she had a mullet at one point. That's really, there's like a couple of random photos and you're like, oh, thank God we got rid of that. Like it's brutal. But Jolene Blaylock, another example of the women of Star Trek kind of getting the shaft. Unfortunately, she found a way to play. I think really she plays the best Vulcan, because she's playing so many things all at the same time. Like she comes off so emotional, but also not at all. Like, how she feels about things, but it's like the way she holds her face, the way she looks at people, the way she's doing things, it's very subtle and it's very complex.
She turns.
Oh my God, the way
so dramatic.
The way,
I love it.
Like that fucking cunty moment with Hoshi, where she like Panformadan, and she's like, I was instructed to speak English on this mission, and it was like, bitch, fucking great, because she, even the way she looks at her, she was just like, I'm not gonna engage you, you hoe. And then they have a little moment later, which was cute, but like, it's just, in like the first reaction she has to the dog, to Porthos, is so funny. She's just like, ugh, this dog stinks. And it's just the stuff that, like, she brings a lot to the character in a way that is like, I don't know. She's the most interesting thing of this episode, to be honest to me. Like, she's the most interesting. Her kind of journey through is actually more compelling than Archer's, because she, at one point, it's like, this mission's fucked, we're leaving, and then decides, I'm going to help them. Like, she helps them modify the sensor, she does all that stuff. And like, she's great. That costume is fucking ugly, but it's better than the other one we get later, which I
did love her away team jacket, or her landing party jacket.
That paper thin that satin chemise she's wearing, and that there's snow and she's freezing to death, and they're just like, oh, do you need a thicker jacket? Here's this satin shawl. I picked out my grandmother's shawl you could have. It's fucking stupid. But yeah, that costume's fucking ugly, but like, she's the most compelling character on the show. Like, if they killed off, like, if it was like a twist where they killed off Bakula, and then Jolene had to play captain the whole series, I would have been totally fine with that because she's one of the most interesting people on the crew, I think. And like her dynamic with Trip is really good, and like that conflict where she's just like, you don't know what you're talking about, and like the sexism that's happening, but in a way where it's like her engagement with it is like, she goes, you can be sexist, you're still wrong. Like it's like that sort of thing. I'm like, love that. Trevor.
Yeah, I think Will, you kind of touched on the genius of Jolene's portrayal of a Vulcan, which is that she's playing someone who's feeling something but controlling it and suppressing it, which is what they're supposed to be doing. She is only our second regular character that is full Vulcan, though something unseen in season 5 that never happened. One of the intentions was to make her half Romulan. We were supposed to find out her father was a Romulan, which would have been interesting. Unfortunate loss by not having a season 5, among several other cool plot points that they were thinking about. But I don't think it was even necessary. I think anyone that said she was too emotional was clearly just not paying attention to the overall arc of the character. The sexiness, I feel like maybe it backfired on me just because I'm a gay man. To me, her being incredibly sexy and incredibly brilliant and the science officer worked because Nimoy, in my opinion, was way hotter than Shatner. And so having an incredibly sexy Vulcan as the science officer just is a normal MO for Star Trek when they go old school. So that just sort of worked for me. And I think it's also just a Jolene thing. She plays being she carries herself as an incredibly stunning person without being kind of snotty. Like she's just gorgeous and kind of a swan and operates that way. And yes, the comment, oh, it was from you, Stan. Yes, Tim Russ is an incredibly handsome man. And didn't get enough. First of all, we didn't talk enough about how Tim Russ is actually pretty fucking hot in Voyage. Like when we did Caretaker, we didn't actually talk about that enough. I still remember that scene where he showed up in the dream naked on the bridge. So yeah, that's ingrained. But yeah, Jolene's there's something kind of cool about the way that Jolene presents her sexiness. Like, was she objectified? Absolutely, but it feels like she was owning it in the moment. I don't know. There's something very powerful about her just as a person that kind of bleeds through the character, in my opinion.
Jerry Ryan did the same, right? It like
yes.
What was done to those actresses, shameful. But what they did with the position that they were put in was incredible. And like we saw with Seven in Star Trek Picard, she's still sexy as hell outside of a cat suit. And they could have done the same thing with T'Pol.
Thank you for saying that. And speaking of the cat suit was not only illogical because it was silly to have her in a cat suit, but Will said it. Like it was ugly as fuck. Like it doesn't make sense that the Vulcans were like, I need like a fun pattern with lots of reds and browns and a little bit of gray. Like it should have been a solid color. It should have had a rank on it and a little emblem of the High Command. And let's just move on. It didn't make sense that it looked like, I don't know, 90s carpet. It was very weird. I think those were my only notes. Yeah. Other than to just say that there's a history of actors' portrayals that Star Trek doesn't deserve sometimes. Marina Sirtis, Picard season 1 didn't deserve what Marina gave us in Nepenthe, and I don't think Enterprise deserved what Jolene gave us pretty much in every episode, especially this one. Mateo,
I like T'Pol. That's it. Because
Thanks,
you guys have said everything else. I fully agree. I think that there's just something about her acting that took the sexism and did what the character would do of like, all right, fine, I'm hot. What are you gonna do? Like, Not like, what are you gonna do about it? But like, you're the captain. Why are you focused on how hot I am? They're arming torpedoes. Like, can we please move past this? Besides that, like we can always talk about like costuming. I can see the Vulcans being like, this needs to be tight so it doesn't get caught on something. But
Yeah.
you're right. Like it's
Her nightgown too. Like I could see the Vulcans being nudists. Like they're logical. They don't have whatever. So her nightgown being pretty ridiculous and sexy. Like I'm as gay as they get, but that was a sexy nightgown.
Yeah, the whole thing. It was, it's. I liked T'Pol. She never deserved to get all the hate that she got.
Trek fans would be wild sometimes.
A lot of times. That's the problem.
Yeah. And sometimes we do it ourselves on accident. Speaking of
Daddy.
Mama.
Push the button.
Yeah,
you're gonna have to just keep pressing that button.
Problematic gay alert.
Charles Trip Tucker III. So hot. This was not the hottest photo that I could have done, but I wanted to temper my objectification of this man.
Why?
Just to be.
You see more.
Yeah. Let's talk about Trip Tucker.
Can I start by sharing my favorite Trip Tucker memory?
Oh God, yes, please.
I'm making myself another drink. I'm going on an away mission really quickly. I'll bring you with me.
My favorite Trip Tucker memory is Stan accidentally admitting how informative to his development those decon chamber scenes were to Connor Trenier last year at STLV. Don't leave Stan alone with celebrities.
Please do not. There was a lull in his line at STLV. Trevor had borrowed a Sharpie to go get someone else's signature, then to come back to get Connor's signature. So I'm just standing there and being like, hey, I love Enterprise, love the podcast.
I jorked it to you. Like, that's a weird. That's very weird.
And how I got there in the 45 seconds that Trevor was gone, I do not know.
We just did it. Hi, I love the podcast. I've jorked a lot to you. Yeah. I just beat it.
It's not exactly how I put it.
I recall, there was a very sitcom moment though, like when you told me what you did, and I looked at you and I was like, I was gone for 45 seconds. Yeah. How did we get there? But whatever.
He's a very handsome man. He still is. And thank you, Connor. And I'm sorry. Let's talk about Trip Tucker in this pilot. I really enjoy this character. There's. I like this character for many reasons, including, as much as I dislike Archer being arrogant, mediocre white man, it works for Trip. He's a brilliant engineer, and like I see needing that perspective. Him wanting to like go defend that child. Like he's just got that Southern charm. He wants to go to the defense of this child, and he needs to be snapped back and told, like, no, this isn't Earth. Get your head out of your ass. That said, him as a bestie to the captain, like them trying to have that dynamic with we get it a little bit further in the series with Archer to Paul and Trip a little bit in like the Kirk Spock Bones-ness of it. It like there's an interesting intermingling there. That also works because instead of Kirk and Spock getting together, it's T'Pol and Trip getting together, which is the hottest combination you can do. Anyway, Trip is a great engineer and a great character.
What I hear you saying is the arrogance works when you've pictured them choking you.
Oh God.
I mean, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna say no. But I also wasn't planning on letting our audience know that particular aspect of my. Anyway,
God.
Matt, you
Matt.
cannot.
No, not that. Oh God.
Be shaking a drink on
worse
camera
when it's
while
off
we are
camera.
talking about.
No, that's worse. That's
That is
worse.
so much
Better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, also bad.
Get the shake
Oh
weights.
God. Oh God.
Push the button.
Problematic gay alert.
Other thoughts on Trip Tucker?
Segment.
Yeah, I again, I think he's one of the most fully formed characters. Like I think because we get this kind of arrogance, this frustration with the Vulcans, his kind of like tension with both Trip and with Archer, I feels like too much of a bad thing. It's like, okay, we don't need both of them to have this kind of sentiment. It's just repetitive, but it works better with Trip being the engineer and like his constant butting head with to Paul. And like I think he's an interesting character. I think as you know, as the show goes on, I think they beat a dead sister to death with the stuff that happened. I got a little over that, but like having that kind of this like arrogant engineer kind of like struck down at some points an interesting story arc. It's just weird the way they did it. But his stuff with T'Pol is again some of the most interesting thing because they're obviously attracted to each other, but they hate each other also with the way where it's like I don't know. It's it's the most interesting thing that the will they won't they thing of the run of this is probably some of the most interesting stuff. But it's no, he's hot. He's good at he's a good actor. He's doing a good job. I do think that I do think that the way sometimes he is in love with the captain too. So it's a little weird the way he's always like he's just like got just this a big hard nacelle for the captain the whole time, and it's like, oh, are they gonna kiss? And they're on that desert planet. I'm like, ooh, they might kiss, but no.
Problematic gay alert.
Yeah. Anyway, he's fine. Anyone else? No.
Matt, go for it. You came off mute, and then you just sit there.
Oh, I was waiting to be polite in case he had anything else to say.
I mean, if you give him space, he'll keep going. So you got to just get in there.
Me?
I think Trip.
I was filling time because no one wanted to talk. Anyway.
Oh my god!
Sorry.
I'll start interrupting you. It's fine. I will say that I think that Will had a really good point too. That I liked Trip being the speciest because he wouldn't have to be in a position where he dealt with him as much. Like, he's an engineer, he's doing other things. Like, Archer is literally running the program, like, or supposedly a high up in the program and sees the Vulcans all the time. So, like, why wouldn't you have seen, like, just it never made sense, and it did double down. It would have been nicer if Archer was more of the, well, let's be understanding. They have a reason for what they're doing. They've been holding us back, and have Trip be the one pushing it all the time. And instead, it did end up like doubling down on them, where it was like, oh, you're just both kind of slimy and shitty. So, yeah, I don't know. I liked him. I liked looking at him. I thought he was kind of but it was fun. I liked him.
Trevor took a big old breath like he was about to let out something.
I did. I was not going to go off on Trip. I was just going to say, and this is not because he's a delicious piece of man. This is just because I think when we finally got gay male regular characters on Star Trek, they were in, I don't want to say stereotypical roles, but slightly stereotypical roles in that their positions on the ship were kind of nerdy and caretaker-y. I think Trip would have been an interesting choice. Give us this Southern farm boy who, yes, eventually, is devastated by the loss of his only sibling, and kind of has a little man crush on the captain. But like, I think he would have been an excellent choice. So I think that was a lost opportunity with Trip. I know there was talk of a character that we'll talk about probably next, potentially being that individual, but I think Trip actually would have been the best choice of this particular cast, for eye candy reasons, but also for let's be a little less conventional and predictable reasons.
Yeah, and that Southern accent being a little faggy too. That would have done a lot of things for me. But yes, let's talk about Lieutenant Wet Blanket next. Also, could have been an interesting gay choice. There were rumors that this was going to happen. He was going to be the first gay character. Would have been interesting. Malcolm Reed serves a purpose in this pilot, and he does it well. And I think Dominic does a great job in this pilot. Overall, like other characters we're going to be talking about, there's just not a lot of development. It feels like they went, oh, we're doing pre-TOS. How did we get to TOS? Let's also take a page out of the TOS playbook and only have 3 characters that get any real development. And that definitely happened with Malcolm Reed. He fires the weapons, and he has the aim of Worf. Anybody have thoughts on Malcolm Reed? Yeah,
it's a bummer because he could be. There's some, they try at certain points in the rest of the show. This episode, he's definitely there to say, yes, my weapons are working. Like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the most this character gets. He gets that fun moment with him and Travis where he goes, keep your shirt on, Lieutenant. Like that's funny. And like if that was like the trope that he's like secretly bitchy, that would be really funny.
Yes.
But they kind of get rid of it. I don't know. He gets one good episode this season, and then that's pretty much it for the rest of the show. So, a bummer. But I mean, the thoughts there. It's just when you have a cast full, people are always going to fall off. You're only going to be able to the writers will go, oh, it's easier to write stuff with T'Pol and Trip and Archer, so they kind of, everyone else gets dropped by the wayside, unfortunately.
Yeah. But there is somebody who doesn't quite fall into that trap, which is this delightful character. I love Phlox, and like I feel like Phlox is what they try to do with Neelix at some points, like affable, a goof, and maybe it's by virtue of him also being the doctor, and having a real role on the ship, not just falling into cooking or whatever. But I love John Billingsley. Shout out to Trek Talks, and they have rescheduled their event for April 5th, which I think is probably on purpose for First Contact Day. Kudos to them. Anyway, we'll talk more about that as it gets nearer. But thoughts on Phlox? Super fun. I love that he's a goof. He has leeches and a weird smile, and he's delightful. Trevor.
I think the only mistake was the backstory of not having him just be in Earth's Starfleet. Like just make a reason for it, give an explanation for it. The 2 aliens not being in Starfleet, so then always wearing things that put them kind of outside of the crew. If you want to distinguish T'Pol in her Vulcan uniform, go for it, even though we've just talked about how dumb the uniform was. Phlox running around in what looks like stuff he grabbed at the big and tall section of some random department store just doesn't. And I say that because like every shirt is supposed to sort of mock Scrubs, but doesn't quite land. Like I don't know. It's just visually that pulls me out, and I'm like, why did you just? You're launching and you're planning to launch this ship at some point. Starfleet doesn't have doctors. Starfleet hasn't pulled in contractors who have visited other worlds, who are from other worlds. Like, it just, I don't know. I'm being a super Trek nerd by being like, I didn't like that he wasn't in Starfleet, but I didn't. Other than that, the character's kind of flawless. I love his constant references to his many spouses. I like that Billingsley has just declared himself as representing a bisexual character. That his wives had husbands and that they used to have a good time together. In his sort of headcanon of it all. I'm going to give myself a canon alert because I said headcanon. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoy the character, and there's literally nothing wrong with him other than what he wears.
I'm inclined to agree. I like this watch through. I normally earlier on when I was, when it was on the air originally, I was anytime Phlox was on screen, I was like, ugh, because I think he reminded me too much of Neelix, but I think the character needs more context because he's just kind of there. And it wasn't like, oh, we didn't have any doctors that know alien physiology that well, or he's like teaching, or he's like someone there that's helping, like some type of like doctor information exchange would have been interesting through like the Vulcan, through the Vulcans that he's there, or the Vulcans assign him and T'Pol to the ship. I find him more endearing definitely in the pilot, and this idea that he's like this um I don't want to say frontier doctor because that's what we're supposed to say with Bashir, but like this kind of mad scientist where he's like, oh, I'm gonna put this eel on your leg. Oh, here's this weird thing. Like that's really cool that like, oh, that you see the foundation of where we get with like medicine later on in the series, where it's interesting that it's come from nature and less like, oh, we've been sitting in the lab putting gross chemicals together and finding stuff out. Like it came from like, oh, maybe Dr. Phlox is like the reason we have certain medical breakthroughs is really interesting. He does look like he is he looks like he dresses like a Chinese dictator, like that long mock thing with the it looks very like that's what it reminds me of for some reason. It looks very Kim Jong-il. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It looks very like I'm a dictator in another country. It's very weird costuming. I think it's fine, but it's weird. I mean, some of the non Starfleet uniforms kind of they're very strange looking. But yeah, I found his character to be delightful, and the Denobulans being very interesting. But yeah, I like that he's kind of like a competent Dr. Zoidberg almost.
Yes.
Where he's like, oh, I'm kind of charming and fun, but I actually know what I'm doing. And he's just like, I'm gonna put this weird salve that's secreted from this weird spider monkey on this burn you have. Like, that's funny to me. And then like the when he gives him the cream and he's just like, sure, and just like closes it. It's so funny. Like he brings a certain level of charm and like energy to the character that I think some of the other actors don't have the same kind of oomph that he brings to the character.
I firmly believe if we did not have Phlox on Enterprise, it would be unbearable to watch. Like, I firmly believe, I don't think we realize what levity and balance he brings to it, with everybody else being these like very typecast characters. It's so much more noticeable when you go back and you're almost, and especially if you've watched it, when you're waiting for him to come on screen to give you that levity and give you that competent know-how with other aliens, and being an alien who has lived among other races, and these humans that really are still like taking their first steps out and everything. I absolutely think he is one of the most important characters, and I absolutely love him. I think he's so good. I don't know if there's a part that I don't like about him. Later on when they deal with, Vulcan AIDS, he like the way they handle that and he handles that is so beautifully done. Yeah, it just the whole thing is incredible.
He has the best bedside manner of all Star Trek doctors, and like I love Crusher, I love some of the others, but by far he has the best bedside manner. He is the most empathetic doctor. I think we see even more so than Culber in a lot of ways. But he has
that was a Bev alert.
Oh yes. I will give myself that Beverly alert.
The thing is, like, yeah.
I forgot what I was going to say anyway. He's great. Oh, he's the most empathetic doctor, and I think he gets some really great episodes. Like there a very controversial one, but his what he does, actually several controversial ones, but his acting in it is incredible in a way that I don't think it would have hit. I think some of the things that he gets to do would not have hit the same with some of the other doctors. Yeah. Any other thoughts on Phlox before we? Well, let's talk about Hoshi Sato. I love her. They didn't give her enough. I love her in this pilot because she's got incredible expertise. They could not have completed this mission without her, and she gets space sick or whatever. Like it's a little goofy. It's a little bit done. I don't like how strongly it continues in the first season. They give her a little bit better footing as they move forward, but not quickly enough, in my opinion. And they certainly don't give her enough to do. Again, it feels like they took a page out of the TOS playbook, and it's like, well, we'll give her a few critical moments here and there, but not really a lot to do otherwise, and not a lot of character development. She has some fun stuff in season 4 and a little bit in season 3 as well, with the Zindi arc. And Linda Park is a fantastic actress. It's been lovely seeing her in other things as well. She's been in For All Mankind recently and a couple of other fun projects. But Ensign Sato, who has thoughts? Trevor, and then Will.
My actually, Hoshi is wonderful in this episode. As the character goes on, the character gets lost. So that would really be my only character note. If they had continued doing with Hoshi what they did in this episode, including trying to give her more scenes with T'Pol, I mean, can we pass the Bechdel test, please? One.
They should have become friends. Like the seeds of it are here, and they completely drop it.
And the arc would have been so rewarding of having them sort of not really see eye to eye initially, and come around to enjoy each other. Would have been a story that we've seen told many times, but not from this perspective. Yeah. The only thing I will say about the portrayal of the character in this episode is that there is a wildly racist thing that is done to her character that we just sort of skip over because it has nothing to do with people per se. It has to do with a location. When Hoshi is not an active duty Starfleet officer, but she's on reserve and they need to go find her, where is she? She's teaching at the university in Brazil, which of course is located in the middle of a jungle outdoors. Why is she teaching class in a fucking jungle? Like, news alert. There are cities in Brazil. There are universities in places that aren't outdoor. No one has to pull a chair up in the middle of the jungle floor and
her khaki shorts, tank top.
And they have technology. It's not just that paper white, like the almost bamboo like calligraphy that is up there, like very Asian calligraphy if you read between the Brazilian lines of it.
It's so bizarre that, like, and we look past it because we're like, oh, she's somewhere else. They've depicted somewhere else by literally putting her somewhere. Because if it was just one building to the next, but like, okay, just give us a cutaway to a matte painting, or I don't know, a photo of fucking Brazil. Like, you don't need, it's not Angel 1. Like, it's just Brazil. We have pictures of it now. Like, we had pictures of it then. We had pictures of it in the 60s. Like, you don't, like, why is my only question. Other than that, her portrayal in this episode is lovely. End of rant.
Will?
Sure. Tough to follow that. Anyway, I like the idea that she is young and that she doesn't want to be an astronaut. Like, she's like, I don't want to do this. Like, I'm the only reason I'm here is because I'm the best linguist in all of Starfleet, and I'm on this ship and it sucks and I don't want to do it. Like, it does feel like it's like she's like, I'm not comfortable being on a starship. That's really funny to me, and it's interesting because it's something we haven't seen really, because everyone else, everyone's like, they've been in space forever and it's not like a big deal, and like her getting space sick is really funny, and like she does get a little bit of character development in the next one, which is the next episode, I believe. Or is it the episode after? I don't remember, but this season she gets an episode where she's like regretting and maybe wants to resign and all that. Interesting. And I it's just a bummer because it does feel like the seeds of her and Paul's friendship could be something. And they literally work next to each other and they couldn't, or them just continuing to hate each other, just being, I don't want to be your friend. Like, we work together and I don't like you. Like, that would be interesting too, but I don't know. It's definitely she got Malcolm Reeded, unfortunately. She gets a little bit of stuff to do here and there, but really she's there just to, and then eventually she doesn't do any translations. They're all speaking English all of a sudden. So it's like, if she's the one writing the universal translator, that's interesting. But like, I don't know. It eventually just the need for there to be utility in the series eventually gets rid of these characters that have very defined specific jobs. But I let Linda Park's fantastic in the role. I think she plays it well. And it's great. But yeah, I just feel like eventually the series kind of eliminates her role in a way that's kind of shameful because it's lazy writing, unfortunately.
Especially since they reversed course from Voyager, not only having a woman captain, but they had 3 women recurring main characters.
Mm-hmm.
Deep Space Nine only had 2, as we know, and so only having 2 in Enterprise, it's like, let them talk to each other.
But why is it only women who are the communications officer? It's like, this is a lady's job. It just feels oddly sexist too. It would have. Don't know if we could have had her be like. I don't know if her being the security officer is a better bet, but like, it does feel a little weird that the 2 times we've had like ongoing regular communications officers, like, I think in the movies, didn't we get one guy?
We got one in Star Trek 3, and he was a total Fajot. Like, he was, yeah.
He's a little broy. Yeah, I remember that guy. And then, yeah, so it's like, it's all kind of only a woman that do it, which is so shitty. But yeah, I don't think she fits in the cast any other way.
It's giving telephone operator vibes.
Oh yeah, it's very like, thank you for calling MCI. Like, it's like one of those things. It's
ringy dingy.
Yeah, it's very, very that, but I don't know.
All right. Well, we've got one more to talk about. Travis Mayweather. Similar problem. Not a whole lot to do, but a beautiful man then and now. A wonderful character that they could have done so much more with than they did. His utility in this episode, I thought, like, sure, makes sense. Leave us wanting more in more ways than one. But yeah. Thoughts on Travis? Trevor?
Get the button ready.
I got it.
Problematic gay alert.
Twice I've touched this man.
Problematic gay alert.
Worth it every time. the character, I loved the idea of, oh, this person lived in space for a really long time. They basically did nothing with it.
Mm-hmm.
And they also did nothing with, perhaps he's also an amazing pilot. Like, is there some reason, like, we've given him this very important role on this allegedly very important ship. Is there some reason we don't also have him as like an ace pilot, just like they did with Paris to XS on a smarter ship that kind of flew itself? But yeah, sure, ace pilot. In this far more mechanical vessel, it would have just made more sense to kind of talk about his prowess at the helm. He just, yeah, I needed to understand more. We needed to spend less time on his, this sounds weird because we're talking about character development. But we needed to spend less time on his family and more time on him. The family background was interesting, but we didn't need to go visit that ship twice. We needed to understand what that did to him as a spacefarer, as a pilot, as a problem solver, as a, like, there were a couple of times where he's like, oh, I saw this anomaly once and here's how you handle it. But there was just not a lot of utility in what should have been a very useful character, not for the reasons that I find would have found him useful.
Yeah, more he gets a little bit, but more of the mechanical piloting of this very experimental starship.
Yes.
It is interesting that it would be like that he is the lowest ranking officer on the bridge, but actually has the most experience in space. So like he is a resource in that regard. So there's this kind of tension between his actual age and rank and like his experience in space. So he's the one that lived in space his whole life. So he's like, oh, I understand all of this. Like we get some cute stuff with him, like the bulkhead moment and like, you know, the butterfly stuff. Like there's some interesting things happening there. But like him being the most seasoned spacefarer, knowing how to deal with like other aliens and like these seedy places they end up is interesting, but they never use it. He just is kind of there to do stuff. And like, if there was a point where they were like, we can't fly through this gas giant, he's like, I can do it. And we give him kind of his triumph moment. That's a good moment. But it's like, again, the utility of this, he's there, but it's like, it's like utilize the people that are around you. Like he doesn't get serviced well. Like it would have, you know, if they were gonna do something interesting, like maybe he has a twin brother and Travis dies and he's got a, you know, he's got a twin brother who then takes over his place on the bridge. Like, you know, do something different. Like, you know, I don't know. It's just, I don't want to be like kill him off, but it just came to my brain that if you had a family who was also on there, like, I don't know.
The really obnoxious part about his rank is that he was supposed to be a lieutenant until they cast Dominic and realized that the age disparity, they needed to demote Travis. Because it didn't make sense to have two characters that far apart in age, which they didn't. I mean, they never said Travis's age. And frankly, the man, I've seen him, like I saw him last year. He looks the same. Like, he could have been any age. It didn't matter. Also, he could have just excelled. Like, God forbid we highlight an excellent individual,
and like nobody gives a shit about the ranks on these ships. Like you've given us a commander in command of a station instead of a captain. You've given us a lieutenant commander as the first officer of Voyager initially, and the Enterprise with Una. Like why Una is not a full commander yet is bullshit. Okay, so I care about rank. Anyway, he could have been a lieutenant. Other thoughts on Travis before we start to wind down? All right then. Well, Trevor, give us the tallies.
I would love to. There were 8 problematic gay alerts.
Good job, everybody.
I'm taking personal responsibility for at least 6 of them. There was 1 cannon alert, there was 1 bev alert, there was 1 tosser alert. That is a diverse array of alerts. Congratulations, all. I gave 10 bonus points to Ken for dad jokes from the comment section. Nice job, Ken. 5,000 bonus points to Will for having no sympathy for dead siblings. Sorry, Trip. I gave 1 bonus point to Matt for finally nailing a pun in the pre-show. But I gave an additional 100 bonus points to Matt for jerking that cocktail shaker on camera.
I usually charge for that too.
If you'd like to see more, sign up for our Patreon at... Sorry. Anyway.
Oh, and we get a Jedzia sighting.
Jedzia. Y'all, this has been lovely as always. Bit of an abrupt end like the pilot. It works. All the podcast things, like and subscribe. Thank you to everybody being active in the chat. I saw some new folks. Thank you. Please subscribe. It's free, and we would love to have you back next week. So you can hit that notify me button whenever you see us popping up. We're available on all of the podcast places as well. If you like to listen to this nonsense, give us a follow, comment, and give us a review would be super helpful on Apple and other places. And until then, until Trevor says something.
Programming note. If you liked this conversation about Enterprise, the first that we've ever done, next week, we start our season 1 thumb war of Enterprise, episodes 1 through 12, 1 through 13. I can't remember.
Somewhere.
Anyway, we're doing the first half of season 1. If you're unfamiliar with Thumb Wars, just go to our YouTube page and look for some of our Thumb War nonsense in other series. But we will be rating each episode with a thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs sideways and then figuring out the average consensus, rating the episode and moving on, talking about it, yelling about it, arguing about it, having a good time. But our second episode ever of Enterprise, and it's a thumb war next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Yes. Like and subscribe. Join us next week. Until then, it's been a long road. But live long and prosper.
All hands abandon ship. Proceed to the nearest evacuation zone immediately.
It's been a long road.